The only Australian coal mine that's pretty famous in India is the Carmichael coal mine. And it's famous because Mr. Gautam Adani bought it over and now imports coal from there for his power projects in India. And by all counts, it's a successful acquisition, financially at least. He had to fight tooth and nail to get it operational though. There were big protests in Australia because of the possible effects it had on the environment. Basically, it's Australia's largest and one of the world's last untouched coal reserves located in the ecologically sensitive Galilee Basin. But Mr. Adani fought through the protest and the mine dispatched its first shipment of coal towards India in December 2021. That's the story of a successful acquisition of a coal mine in Australia. But join me for today's video where I take you through the murky details of how ICICI Bank financed the acquisition of an unsuccessful coal mine and gave the money to a now bankrupt Indian company, and how this deal burnt an $850 million hole in its pockets. And of course, who's to blame? And guys, if you like such videos, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more such financial content. In 2010, banks were pretty upbeat on the global energy sector and were willing to give loans to companies exploring that business. Not only that, it was a period of abundance. It was when the Congress-led UPA Alliance was in full swing. Banks were lending money carelessly in the hopes of growing fast, and there were even claims that public sector banks were being instructed to lend money to certain business houses. And the worst part was, during that era, when loans went bad, instead of declaring it as an NPA and recognizing it as a loss, banks used to restructure the loan and give more money to cover it up. The cleanup of banks began in 2016 onwards. So it was in 2010, during this era, when a consortium of banks led by ICICI Bank, which included Bank of Baroda, Indian Overseas Bank and Exim Bank, lent a total of $1.4 billion to a company named Lanco Infratech. It's worth pointing out that ICICI Bank lent majority of this money and due diligence would primarily fall on them. Lanco wanted the loan to purchase a coal mine in Western Australia named Griffin Coal Mine. But let me tell you about Lanco a bit more. Lagadapati Amarappa Naidu and Company, or Lanco, was once upon a time a 35,000 crore group with business interests in power, infrastructure, natural resources and EPC, which is basically construction of large-scale engineering projects. The group was founded by a Congress MP whose name was none other than Lagadapati Rajagopal. Mr. Rajagopal was not your average politician. He in fact very shrewdly used his political power to build a business empire, and the rise of Lanco coincided with his own rise in the late 90s. He belongs to and was a member of parliament or MP from Andhra Pradesh. A memorable incident with him was in 2014 when he sprayed pepper spray on his colleagues right inside the Lok Sabha parliament. He even referred to them as a mob in a TV interview. Lanco's skill lied in bagging very large infrastructure projects, roads, power projects, ports and stuff like that. All these were funded by massive bank loans, and these loans were often restructured. I'm sure you can guess why. Fresh loans were also granted to the group even though the lenders were aware of loans not being paid back on time. Lanco managed to become India's largest private power supplier by 2011. Just to narrate you an incident, Lanco was defaulting on loans and struggling to pay salaries. Yet in December of 2013, it somehow managed to get one of its loans for 9,000 crores restructured. The details are quite fascinating. Lanco got a further loan of 2,500 crores, a reduction in interest and a 2-year moratorium for repayment. It was only in 2017 that IDBI Bank, under the directions of RBI, began bankruptcy proceedings against Lanco. And Lanco was one of the original Dirty Dozen, which was basically a group of 12 massive companies saddled with debt. These 12 companies were the first batch to be tried under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Act of 2016. All the mess came out after that. The restructured loans ended up as big defaults on the books of the bank. There was evidence of diversion of funds to the tune of 2000 crores. And Mr. Rajagopala's business empire came crumbling down in tandem with his political clout. End result, you ask? No one wanted to buy Lanco in bankruptcy proceeding, and it was eventually liquidated for just 198 crores. Just banks were owed 6,217 crores, and there were many other unsecured creditors standing in line as well. So that was Lanco. Now let's come to the Griffin coal mine it purchased and under what circumstances ICICI Bank lent it money. Griffin coal mine, which is now itself under liquidation, was purchased by Lanco for 750 million Australian dollars in 2010, which was a steep price to pay back then, considering its previous owners were in debt and wanted to sell the mine for anything they could get. Not only that, the mine was landlocked and would require Lanco to invest heavily and pointlessly in infrastructure to carry the coal to the ports. The mine also had to honor long-term contracts to supply coal to a power plant that produced power for a good portion of Western Australia, which was anyways going through a serious energy crisis. So that was a sensitive issue. The production of coal from the mine over the years was less than optimal, and it was low quality coal as well. Then it comes as no surprise that the mine could barely cover its cost of production and was practically loss making from the first day. So my question here is that why would ICICI Bank, who was then under the leadership of Chanda Kochhar, fund such an acquisition? Didn't they do their due diligence? Didn't they know that funding the purchase of a coal mine in Australia is a tricky business? Be that as it may, ICICI Bank lent an amount of $850 million in tranches to Lanco. The Australian media said that figure finally turned out to be 1.1 billion Australian dollars lent by ICICI Bank, and a total of $1.4 billion if you consider all the other banks in the consortium as well. This loan was given at around the same time as the one Chanda Kochhar gave to the Videocon group. You know, the 3,250 crore one where she received a kickback. All her troubles began after that deal came to light, and she's still fighting the case, going in and out of jail. The loan to Lanco became an NPA in 2017 and was fully provided for and written off by ICICI Bank in 2018 in its books. And the worst part is, it didn't even make a public disclosure to RBI or its shareholders. Things became public in August of 2022 when Griffin coal mine went into liquidation and ICICI tried to fight off an attempt to acquire it, which then led to revelations in court documents. Banks usually cut their losses and walk away once a loan turns bad. But ICICI Bank tried to make a bad situation worse when it lent a further amount of $60 million to a loss-making subsidiary of Griffin coal mine in an attempt to have the mine transferred to it. There are claims that it's forcing the mine to sell coal at a higher price to recover some losses. Quite a few news agencies have sent emails to ICICI Bank MD and CEO Sandeep Bakshi regarding this matter, but they have gone unanswered. So all in all, the bank is now stuck with the ownership of a loss-making mine, which the Australian government might take over. And the bank had to write off a huge amount in its books as a loss in 2018. There's practically no scope of any recovery, and such write-offs affect the profitability of the bank, which then affects ICICI Bank's share price. So end of the day, it's us, the retail investors, that are affected. Now, of course, ICICI Bank has recovered from this episode and the damage the Chanda Kochhar regime had on the bank. And I'll even stick my neck out and say it's now probably the best private bank whose shares you can buy. But the point is, someone needs to accept the blame for such misadventures, and RBI needs to investigate this matter further. Thank you.